Thank you. Okay, so I was with some of you in the Media Supernova panel discussion just now, and we were talking about this very, very specific intersection that the media is at between technological shifts and these very cultural shifts that are going on. And I want to carry on talking about this particular intersection because it's not just affecting the media, it's actually affecting all of us, and it's affecting how we operate, and it's affecting how we do business, and it's affecting how we use all kinds of information. And just to start things off, I want to give you a quick example of what I mean by how this is affecting the way we do things. I'm going to start with a question, and it's kind of a hard question. It's kind of boring. So to get you guys to shout some answers, I'm going to give away a grand prize, a copy of The Pirate's Dilemma for whoever gets closest to the answer. So the question is this: if you were sued every time you accidentally violated copyright law in a single day, how much money would you owe? What would that figure be that you had to pay up at the end of the day? Now, I'm not talking about... More than I have. Right, that's a good answer. So it's not like, intentionally buying a pirate handbag or downloading pirate music. I'm talking about making a photocopy of a book, or singing happy birthday in public, or sending an email with another email attached to it that you didn't write, that you don't own the copyright to. Anybody got any idea what this figure might be? In a single day. 50,000. I hear 75,000 from the lady over here. Anybody want to go higher? $1 million? Did I hear $5 million? Anyone want to go higher? Higher, lower? $7 million. I'm going to close the bidding at $7 million. $8 million. $50 million. All right, we've gone too high now. I'm going to close the bidding. I'm going to close the bidding at $8 million. The actual figure is $12.45 million. Let me just, can we give a round of applause to this guy here? $8 million. Well done, sir. There you are. There's a copy of The Pirate's Dilemma. I'll sign it afterwards, but enjoy that. Love this book, cherish this book. If you photocopy it, I'll sue you. Right. So this is crazy, right? $12.45 million. That's $4.5 billion a year. Now, of course, nobody's going to get sued for this, but the point is you could be sued for this. And this is pretty crazy. Why are our laws so out of touch with the way we actually use information and the way we actually move information around? Well, this is something we've been talking about a lot today. The world's really changed. Information used to really flow in one direction. You used to have broadcasters up here, and you used to have receivers down here, producers and consumers, and whoever owned the means of production called the tune. And that's not really the case anymore in the age of the internet. This has become a two-way street. There's been this real technological shift, and anybody can produce and consume and transmit and broadcast and receive, and that's causing a lot of problems. But the other side to this intersection is a cultural problem. We are all relentless copying machines. It's how we love to copy things. Think about it. It's how we learn to speak. It's how we learn all our social norms. So we love copying things, and now we have this incredible network that we can just copy anything with. And so all kinds of information are leaking out all over the place, and nobody can control it, and everybody's very worried about what's going on. They see what's happening, and they see piracy. And piracy is obviously a huge problem, and people should be concerned because pirates cause a lot of problems. But pirates also cause something else. Solutions. Pirates cause solutions. And so what I want to talk to you today about is how you can understand how pirates do this and how you guys can actually benefit from that. So I'm going to keep it very simple. We've got three parts to this talk. Why is piracy important? How does it work? And how should you guys respond? So part one, why is piracy important? Well, the obvious answer is piracy is a threat. If your business is in the business of information of any kinds at all, then you're under threat from piracy. The music industry is under threat from piracy, Hollywood, the fashion business, video games, the pharmaceutical business. If you're in the business of information, piracy is a problem. This we know. And we also know it's going to get worse. But the question is, how much worse can it get? Well, I don't know the exact answers to that, but let me give you some idea. Let me give you the nightmare scenario. Anybody know what one of these things is? This is called a 3D printer. Anybody familiar with the 3D printer? Yeah, a couple of you? Okay, so a 3D printer, it's like a 2D printer which prints ink on paper to form letters and words and whatever. A 3D printer uses a laser to trace out physical 3D objects in ceramics or resins or starches and even rubbers actually now. And people use these to to build prototypes of cars, to build prototype architectural models, new consumer goods models. People are even printing out sneakers. Where's Nike? Okay, so a lot of brands are using this, and this is really cool. It's like revolutionized industrial design. Like it's totally changed how industrial design is working in many, many respects. But here's the scary thing about the 3D printer. Moore's law is in full effect here. These things are getting cheaper, they're getting faster, they're getting smaller. And if you talk to people in the 3D printing business, they'll actually tell you that they think in 5 to 10 years' time, people will have these things in their homes, connected to the internet, and will be downloading physical products that they then use. Well, that's pretty scary, right? But the scary thing is it's already happening. This is a soccer boot made by a London company, a small company called Prior to Leather. And what they do is that they scan the foot of a professional soccer player, and then they print out like this boot which is perfectly formed to their foot. Now these things are really expensive right now. You basically have to be a professional soccer player to afford a pair of these things. But like I said, that's now. It's getting scarier. This problem's getting cheap. These things are getting cheaper, and one day they may be a real problem. What's Nike going to do when kids are downloading Air Jordans the way they're downloading MP3s? Like, what happens then? I mean, I don't know. Actually, I do have some idea. I think Nike will be fine, and I'm going to talk more about them and why they'll be fine later. But it's a scary thought. If that doesn't like blow your mind enough, think about this. I know a guy, a professor at the University of Bath, who has built a 3D printer that can print a 3D printer. Right? So think about that. That's scary. So piracy is a threat. It's scary, and it's getting scarier. But piracy is something else as well. Piracy is an opportunity. And people think I'm crazy when I say this, but I came to this conclusion at a really, really young age. I grew up here in London, and I was obsessed with music growing up, specifically the music that was being played by the many, many pirate radio stations that exist in London. Now, a lot of people in the States, they don't really understand the concept of pirate radio, so I'm going to explain to you very quickly. You have all these tiny, illegal, homemade radio stations that people build in their houses, so that you put the turntables in the kitchen next to the sink, or you put them in the bedroom that no one's using, and then you have a transmitter tacked onto the top of a tall tower block, and you broadcast music unregulated to large chunks of the city. And this is really cool. This is where all these kind of new forms of music start in London. And growing up, I was a good kid. I didn't really get in lots of trouble. But I had to break the law and become a pirate radio DJ as soon as I possibly could. Why? Because I could see that pirate radio was really beneficial to London. I could see that it was helping the music scene, and it was something that was just really good for the music industry. So I spent most of my weekends at the top of tower blocks like this one, playing new music to little chunks of London, or actually quite large chunks of London. We had a really good area. It was a good pirate I was on. And actually, pirates, I think the last count, there's something like 150 pirate stations in the UK. Most of them are in London. And they actually account for about 10% of London's radio audience tunes into the pirates. And although it's illegal and you can get in trouble, it's not a criminal offence, and you won't get prosecuted for doing it, and I was never caught for it, I'm proud to say. It's kind of tolerated, and the reason it's tolerated is I wasn't the only one who thought this. So here's the London radio market. You've got two big stations that play music to young people, and they're owned by large multi-million-dollar media companies, and they face these same commercial pressures that multi-million-dollar media companies that own radio stations face all over the world. And that means the same thing that it means for other commercial radio stations, the same 20 songs 20 times a day. But the pirates don't exist in that space. The pirates are kind of over here, they're outside of the market. And the pirates, weirdly enough, the most experimental pirates are the ones that become the most popular. So the pirates are really, they're like the crucible, they're like when new innovation is really, really being created in this space. And so this is when new bands get their first break. It's where new radio DJs get their first job that eventually move on to the commercial stations. It's how entire music scenes are created. So I was fascinated with this relationship growing up between the underground and the mainstream and how it worked. And I tried to sort of apply it to everything else I did. I got a degree in economics and ended up working in the mainstream music industry and in advertising. And when I was 23, I became the editor-in-chief of this magazine, Rewind magazine, which was a magazine that really focused on all the music that the pirates were putting out in London. And we started in 2001, and in the space of about 3 years, I think in 3 years we became the largest urban music magazine in the UK, and I'm proud to say Rewind still is the largest urban music magazine in the UK. And I moved over here in 2005, and I decided to write a book about this weird relationship between pirates operating in the underground and how they kind of affect the mainstream and vice versa. So I started doing some research, and I started to think, okay, so I think piracy's cool, but is it really cool? Like, what else have pirates done for society? What has a pirate ever really done for us? Well, it turns out pirates have done a lot of really cool things for society. I was shocked to discover that pirates have even started entire nations, like this one. This is Sealand, ladies and gentlemen. This is a disused World War II sea fort, which is out in the English Channel. And it was used in World War II to shoot down the Luftwaffe as they flew in to bomb London. It had gun turrets on top of it. And it was left to sort of just rot in the sea after the war. But I don't know if you can see up here on this map, Sealand is just outside of British waters, so it's actually in international waters. And in the 50s and 60s, there were all these pirate radio DJs that went out and took over these old sea forts and turned them into radio stations. But this one pirate, this guy named Roy Bates, he realized that this particular sea fort was in international waters. It wasn't part of the UK. And he started thinking about this, and he had a brainwave. And so it was that in 1966, on Christmas Eve, he invaded this sea fort and declared that he was Prince Roy of Sealand, and this was sovereign territory. He hoisted a flag, he moved in with his family, added a helipad, and he began printing coins and stamps and passports. And if you go on eBay right now, you can become a lord or lady of Sealand for about $30. So this is crazy. This pirate created this entire nation, and in 2000 he launched an offshore data warehousing company. So Sealand was not only the first pirate nation, it was also set up to become the global capital of internet anarchy. Unfortunately, it was badly damaged in an electrical fire in 2006, and Sealand is now up for sale for a couple of $1 million if any of you are interested. So that's pretty cool, right? A pirate created an entire nation. But I did a bit of digging, and I found out that pirates actually created another nation. America, ladies and gentlemen. America was founded on piracy. During the Industrial Revolution, American foreign policy was to completely ignore all international copyright, patent, and IP laws wholesale. And that's how America was able to industrialize quickly and cheaply. And this really annoyed Europeans. And they began calling Americans Yankees, which is a Dutch slang term meaning pirate, which we today pronounce Yankees. So that's pretty crazy. And if you go into American history, actually a ton of great American innovators were thought of as pirates when they started. Thomas Edison, when he invented the phonographic record player, was branded a pirate by musicians because they saw this guy recording these perfect copies of the music they played live onto these weird plastic discs, and they're like, we're ruined, it's the end of us. Like, how can we compete with that? We can't be in all these places at once. And so they thought he was a pirate, and then obviously they worked out a way to pay artists for these little plastic discs, which we call the record industry today. And then Edison went on to invent filmmaking, and when he invented filmmaking equipment, he wanted to charge a license fee to filmmakers using his great invention. And a lot of filmmakers really, really didn't like this. They thought the fee was too high. One of these guys was a guy named William, and William and other New York filmmakers actually fled New York to the then still very wild West Coast to get away from Edison and his lawyers, and they could flee to Mexico if they needed to. And they started this little community of pirate filmmakers on the West Coast. It's really, really cool little town. It's still there today, ladies and gentlemen. It's called Hollywood. William's second name, by the way, was Fox. So pirates have done all these cool things. Piracy is clearly a threat, but it's also created a lot of opportunities throughout history. The difference between piracy then and piracy now is it used to happen in one industry at a time. It was happening in the recording industry and then filmmaking. But now, because of the internet, it's happening to lots of different industries at the same time. And this problem is really affecting all of us. So how does piracy work? How do pirates innovate? How do they manage to beat the authorities and companies and do all these crazy things? Well, I'm going to tell you this story by telling you how pirate radio actually started in Europe, because it's a very interesting story. See, when radio started at the beginning of the 20th century, you guys here in the States, you got it straight away. You understood this. This is a great new medium. You can play music to people, and you can sell ads around it. It's brilliant, right? So that's what you guys did. Not so in Western Europe. This was way too powerful a medium to be turned over to the people. So commercial radio was completely illegal in Western Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. Except in one tiny little country, I don't know if you can see this, Luxembourg on the map. In 1933, they launched the station Radio Luxembourg, which was the first commercial station to exist in Europe. Now, the thing about Radio Luxembourg was it had the most powerful radio transmitter in the world at the time. So as well as getting out to Luxembourg, they actually hit most of the rest of Western Europe. And this really frustrated a lot of entrepreneurs. They were looking at all the ad revenue that Radio Luxembourg was making. They're like, well, what's going on here? Like, we should be able to do this. We should be in this space. And it really highlighted a legal loophole for all these entrepreneurs that you could broadcast into Europe from outside of Europe if you could figure out a way to do it. And this is the first thing that pirates do really well. Pirates, unlike regular entrepreneurs, they don't look for gaps inside the market. They look for gaps outside of the market. They look at the places where the market won't go, and they go there. And there was one gap everybody could see here. It was the English Channel. And so that's where the pirates went. And they bought all these old fishing boats and military boats and put radio transmitters on them and headed out to sea and started playing rock and roll to Europe in the 50s and 60s. This is Radio London. It was one of the most popular. This one's Radio Caroline, which was run by the Rolling Stones ex-manager. And so all these pirates, oh, and the sea forts as well had a ton of pirate stations on, which is where our friend Prince Roy got started. So they're all out in the English Channel and they're playing music to large swathes of Europe. And people loved this. Free rock and roll. It was incredible. What a great idea. And European governments were really intimidated by the pirates because they could see how popular they were. And they understood, or they feared, that if they closed them all down, there'd be a revolution, there'd be riots in the streets, because people wanted their music. So they chose not to fight them. They did the only thing they could really do, and that was they legalized commercial radio. And all these legal stations started, and some of the pirates came onto dry land and became legitimate radio DJs. In the UK, the BBC poached all the big DJs from Radio London and set up its own pirate copy of a pirate radio station called Radio 1, which is still the largest radio station in the UK. And all over Europe, eventually, commercial radio became accepted, and that was great. Rock and roll was here to stay. But what I love about this story is it shows us that the three things that pirates do really well. The first, as I said, is they look for gaps outside of the market. They look for places where regular entrepreneurs won't go. So whether that gap is the English Channel or if it's Hollywood, they go somewhere they're not supposed to. And when they get to this space outside of the market, the second thing they do is create a vehicle. They create some kind of medium which is also sending a message to people. So the pirate radio ships were pirate radio ships, that was the medium, but the message was clearly free rock and roll supported by ads is kind of cool, maybe we should have this in Europe. The medium in Hollywood was a town. The message was Edison's licensing fees are too high, they really suck, we need to change this. And so they did. But the third and most important thing, and this really separates good pirates from the bad pirates, really effective pirates get the power of their audience and harness it in some way and get society behind them. And when pirates do this, they're really hard to beat because they create this debate in society. Well, hang on a sec, what's right, what's wrong? Should we be able to do this? Should we not be able to do this? And this period of chaos that they create, if they're really good and they are actually adding some kind of value to society, this chaos becomes the new order of things and it's enshrined in law and that's great. So how do you guys respond? That's really the only question because it's clear pirates are out there and it's clear that could be affecting all of us soon, and I know they're affecting a lot of you in this room from talking to you already. Well, okay, so the first thing, very obvious, fight. Sometimes the best thing to do is to fight pirates. Sometimes pirates are adding no value to society whatsoever. Colgate Palmolive get no value from pirate copies of their toothpaste that are toxic to their customers. Customers are not going to get behind that. If you're in the luxury goods space, if you're Burberry, I'm sure most of your consumers aren't going to be very excited about this car. If you're Rolex, I'm sure lots of your customers aren't going to be over the moon about this wonderful wall clock, ladies and gentlemen. But I could be wrong about this. Maybe there's something in this that we're not seeing. Maybe Rolex should be getting into the home furnishings business. I don't know. The point is, what pirates do when they come into your market and they threaten you by taking your brand or putting it on some new product or whatever it is that they're doing, they force you to ask a question. They force you to ask yourself, or at least you should be asking yourself, well, what business are you really in? And the thing is, if we get the answer to this question wrong when we're threatened by pirates, the effects can be devastating. And no business has learnt this harder than the music industry has in the last 10 years. So if you go back 10 years, if you go back to 1999 when file sharing networks really started to become a problem for the record business didn't want to entertain the idea of setting up some kind of digital distribution network of its own. They didn't want to even think about that. And this really sent a message to people, a lot of people who were already sharing music online. This sent a message that this wasn't the music industry. What it said was this is actually the little plastic disc industry. Because a lot of people could already see that this, well, hang on, maybe there's something to this. Maybe this is a really good way to buy and sell music. Maybe this is more efficient, clearly. But the majors disagreed, and so piracy grew, and the little plastic disc industry began to shrink. And because people were getting behind these pirates, a lot of these pirates became brand names. And the majors responded by chucking lawsuits at them. They got rid of Napster, but that only made things worse, and they got smaller, and the pirates were doing better. Because what the pirates had really done was highlighted that that wasn't the music industry. This was the music industry. This was where the future of the business was. And as Steve Jobs once put it, if you want to stop piracy, the best way to stop it is to compete with it. And so that's exactly what he did, and he launched iTunes, and he's been incredibly successful in this space. And now there's a ton of people out here, Napster's back and it's legal, Amazon's in this space, and you've got all these independent artists. That a third of the music industry is now independent labels, and that's an incredible number. And the problem was the majors didn't really see piracy for what it often is. It's often a market signal. It's often telling you that something in your business isn't working quite the way it should be, and maybe you should be looking at fixing it. So CD sales, this is a 2006 figure, going down astronomically. It's all doom and gloom at the majors when you talk to them about CDs. But do you know what? Every other part of the music industry is doing incredibly, incredibly well. Vinyl sales doubled in the UK last year. This is insane. And what's happening is free music online is subsidizing every part of this business. The ecosystem, the CD sales are plummeting, people are losing money overall, but the business is changing, and I think in the end, it's going to actually be doing better. The problem was the majors thought this was their business, when in fact today this is only a quarter of what we consider to be the music business. So fighting is one response, but it's not often the right response. If pirates are adding value in some way, you should look at competing with them. So 2 questions. When should you compete with pirates? How should you do it? So the when. Well, you should compete with pirates when they're adding value. And I want to come back to Nike. And where are you, Nike? You still here? Hi, Nike. How you doing? Okay, so Nike understand the value of the remix. We clearly saw this in their presentation. But I want to talk about a specific case where they really did the right thing. And that's in the case of the Air Force One. I don't know how many people outside of Nike in this room are familiar with this shoe. But this is an incredibly popular shoe. It was originally launched in 1982 as a basketball shoe. But it's been kept alive for 25 years because of the hip-hop generation's love for its very simple, iconic design, and it became a staple of hip-hop culture, and it's been customized and remixed many times. And Nike, in fact, themselves customize and remix this shoe. Almost every single week, there's a new version of this shoe out. But that didn't stop one guy, a hip-hop DJ from Tokyo named Nigo, from creating his own pirate copy of this shoe. He created this. This is called the Bapester. And what he did was he took the Air Force One as his inspiration. He ripped off the swoosh. He put on his own shooting star-like emblem, and he started releasing these things in really small quantities, in really garish colors that even Nike hadn't experimented with, like patterns and all these crazy things he was doing. And he sold them for $300 each in really, really limited quantities. And so this was crazy, and people went crazy for these shoes. And now Nigo has, I think it's over 16 stores in London and Tokyo and New York. But that's not the cool thing. The cool thing is what Nike did. Nike didn't look at this like, here's a guy pirating our shoes, we should sue him and close him down. They looked at this as a remix. And the thing about a good remix is it actually adds value to the originals. So instead of suing Nigo, Nike decided to compete with him. And they began to be even more aggressive about releasing their own remixes of the Air Force Ones. And although the Bape shoes are doing really, really well, the Air Force One is still the most successful basketball shoe franchise on the planet, more than 25 years after it was first launched. So that's crazy. So when pirates are adding value, that's clearly a time you should compete with them. But there's another time you should compete with pirates, and that's when obscurity is a much greater threat. And nowhere is obscurity more of a threat these days than in the book industry. The book industry is a terrible place to be, let me tell you. There's 2 million books on Amazon.com. There'll be, I think it's 200,000 books are going to come out this year, and on average, each one's going to sell 500 copies. It's not a great business to be in. So obscurity is a problem if you're an author. But piracy can actually be a really good marketing tool if you're an author, because online ebooks and physical copies of books are not really the same thing. And a really famous author, a guy called Paul Coelho, had some success with this earlier this year with this book. It's a bestseller here, a bestseller in Europe called The Alchemist. But he wasn't selling many copies in Russia. He was selling something like 1,000 copies a year. And him and his publishers couldn't work out why people in Russia didn't want to buy this book, because the rest of the world seemed to really like it. So behind his publisher's back, he found some Russian pirate translations of the ebook of The Alchemist online, and he started a blog called The Pirate Coelho and started posting links to where his fans could get all these pirate copies of his books. And The Alchemist in Russia went from selling 1,000 copies a year to 10,000 copies a year to 1 million copies a year. And this is crazy. Now, lots of authors are experimenting with this model. I know France is doing this. You can download the Medici effect for free. My first meeting when I go back to New York on Wednesday is with my publishers in the UK and in the US. And we're definitely doing it. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but watch this space. So yeah, and it brings up this really interesting distinction between how we view information. Because on the one hand, we want to get our information out there. We want as many people to know about it as possible. But on the other hand, a lot of our information we consider property. We consider it intellectual property. And Coelho was smart because he realized that his ebook was information, but his physical copies of his book were his property, and he used one to sell the other. But it's not just struggling authors that are facing this problem of obscurity and seeing piracy as the better option. It's huge companies, and nowhere in the world has this distinction between information and property been more apparent than in the software business. Now, we're going to hear from IBM tomorrow. 40 years ago, IBM treated software as information. The idea that software was property wasn't around 40 years ago, and even up until the 1970s, you had groups of kids like the Homebrew Computer Club. This was a group of kids, including Steve Jobs and his Apple co-founder, Steve Wozniak, who used to get together in a garage in California and mess around with computer code and publish a newsletter about it. Now, that all changed in 1976 when they got a rude letter from this guy telling them they were all criminals. And this is a young programmer. His name was Bill. And he said he had this program called BASIC, and the Homebrew Computer Club was messing around with BASIC. And he said to them, "Hang on, this is intellectual property. Like, I spent hours on this thing. You can't just like start messing around with it." And do you know what? Bill had a point. Like, he put a lot of time into this. Why shouldn't he be paid for his time? And so he actually turned the tide of opinion in software, and he did actually end up scratching a pretty good living from his software, in case any of you were worried. And here's how he kind of saw the software industry. There's a software industry, there's Bill, there's everybody else, and if you were outside of this space, if you were somewhere over here, well, you're probably just some kind of pirate, right? You weren't worth paying attention to. But the thing is, in software, not everybody thinks of information as property. And we know this because we have this open source community, and it's growing, and it's encroaching on the software industry's business model. And the interesting thing is now Microsoft is having to compete with open source and take it seriously. If you go to China today, where 90% of everything is a pirate copy, a legitimate copy of Windows in China costs around $3. And the reason for this is Microsoft want people to be using their product in China. They don't care if they have to sell it at a loss at this point, because ongoing, they would rather people were using Microsoft products than using Linux or other free alternatives. So Microsoft competes with piracy in China because obscurity is a much greater threat. So that's the when. Here's the how. So the first thing you need to do if a pirate is encroaching on your business model, you need to look at what they're doing. You need to let them do it, at least for a while. Allow others to remix your ideas. We saw how Nike did this and how actually this added value to the original But the other thing allowing people to remix your products does is it creates innovations that never in a million years would you have seen coming. And there's no better example of this than in the video game business. Go back to 1981. This is a game that came out for the Apple II. It's called Castle Wolfenstein. And it was a World War II era game. You were like this Allied spy, and you were going up and down through this castle and shooting Nazis. And it was a really popular game. And these three 11-year-olds in the United States were really, really impressed with this game, and they loved it. They had one problem with it. They weren't really sure who the Nazis were or why they should be scared of them. I guess they hadn't got to that part in history class yet. They were, however, very, very scared of the Smurfs for some inexplicable reason. And they found a back door into this game. They found a way to hack into the code, and this was the first time this ever happened. These three 11-year-olds hacked into Castle Wolfenstein and created Castle Smurfenstein. Now, in Castle Smurfenstein, instead of shooting out with the Nazis, you're confronted with these blue and white killing machines in this castle. And this was a huge, huge underground hit in the 80s. It was distributed on floppy disks and on bulletin boards, the early prototype of what became the internet. And so all these geeky kids in the 80s were blown away by this concept that you could open up a video game that's kind of like a coloring book, and you could change things and do all these crazy things. So this really profoundly affected some kids who grew up in the 80s, many of whom went on to become game developers in the 90s. This one kid in particular named John Carmack, who founded a company called ID Software in the 90s. He ended up buying the rights to Castle Wolfenstein, and he released Wolfenstein 3D, which was the world's first-person shooting game, you know, where you're looking down the barrel of a gun and shooting people. And he was a big fan of Smurfenstein when it came out. And as a shout-out to Smurfenstein, he deliberately left the code in this game open. You could go in, you could change the levels, and you could change the characters, you could do all kinds of crazy stuff. And this had a really amazing effect. This actually increased the lifespan of this product because fans were really passionate about remixing it and changing it. And ID saw that the fans added loads of value to the game and helped them develop the game's successors, this game Doom, and then Quake, which came out some years later, which won the most popular video games of all time. And this idea of being able to remix video games has really changed the industry. They have this huge pool of amateurs remixing games and creating crazy new stuff for games all the time. And it's this labor pool that they don't have to go out and train a lot of people because they can just hire the most popular game remixer. Just the way in the music business, a lot of music producers get their start making illegal remixes of records. So that's really cool, but the other thing that happened in the video game industry was because people were remixing games, new innovations, this entirely new subculture has started called machinima. And what machinima is fans taking characters from games and turning them into actors and taking the levels of games and turning them into backdrops and creating movies. You have this series called Red vs. Blue, which is all made entirely using the game Halo. You have the film Sundown, which was shot entirely on location in Grand Theft Auto. MTV has a show called Video Mods, which is music videos made with the code from video games. There's a Machinima festival. Ladies and gentlemen, you can even buy Machinima for dummies. I mean, this is insane. It's this entirely new market that nobody could have predicted. Nobody could have seen this coming. So remixes add value, they create innovation, but bizarrely, they also create demand in some cases. A really great case of this is the fashion business. The fashion business is really unique because although you can protect the 2D design of the skinny jean here, you can't actually protect the 3D garment. The 3D garment can be copied or remixed. And so that's what happens. Someone designs a skinny jean, for example, and the next thing you know, some other designer's like, oh, that's cool, well, I'm going to make my own version of that. And so suddenly there's skinny jeans all over the catwalks, and fashion journalists are like, skinny jeans are in this season. The next thing you know, celebrities are wearing them, and eventually they trickle down to the rest of us. So because copying can happen in fashion at this level, it creates trends and it creates demand, and suddenly everyone wants to wear the skinny jean. But what it also does, because people can copy this also kills trends, because when enough people are wearing something, it's not cool anymore. When you can buy the skinny jean for $16 in Walmart, well, that's a sign for fashion designers in Paris that they need to move on. So that's pretty cool. So allowing others to remix your ideas creates all these new forms of innovation and adds all this value. So that's step one. The second thing you have to do is ask yourself this question: what business am I really in? Because if pirates start giving away what it is that you do for free, well, you've got to work out, well, hang on a second, what is it that I'm really selling here? Because you can compete with people giving stuff away for free, even though you're not giving it away for free. You can sell them something else. A really good example is iTunes. iTunes sells convenience. If you look at iTunes, they've made $4 billion since they launched. And that doesn't make any sense, because every single thing you can get on iTunes, you can get over here from the pirates for free, right? But a lot of people don't want to do that. They have the moral objection to it, of course, but the other thing is, well, hang on, I don't know what a BitTorrent site is, and I've only got 5 minutes, and I want this new album, whatever, okay, I'm buying this from here. And so iTunes is more convenient. People understand it, they know where the music is, so they use it. If you look at Windows Vista versus Linux, this is a really, really, really weird example. Talk to anybody who uses Linux about Linux. They love Linux. Linux is incredible. It's going to revolutionize everything. The European Union put out a report in 2006 about how Linux has saved them billions because they're using this incredible free software. Linux is incredible, but people love it. Talk to somebody go and look online at some of the press about Windows Vista. Nobody likes Windows Vista. It's terrible, it sucks, it's buggy, it's awful, it's this, it's that. Nobody likes it. But let me tell you something, Windows Vista is 900% more successful, more popular, than Linux. People are still buying Vista, even though there's an incredible free alternative over here. Why are they doing that? I'll tell you why they're doing that, because the learning curve on Linux looks like this. It's insanely hard to use, unless you're a real geek and you really understand the ins and outs of setting up operating systems. I don't even know. I don't know how to use it. People are buying Vista, or they're buying a Mac, or they're buying whatever it is. Now, I think this is going to change. I think it's one of the reasons Microsoft is trying to buy Yahoo, but that's another story. You can sell convenience, and you can compete with free by doing that. Something else you can sell is experience. You can sell people an experience. If pirates are giving something away for free, you can sell them an entirely different experience, even though you kind of would think these are the same products. Look at the movie industry. This is a really interesting example. The movie industry is under fire from piracy like never before. Last summer on Canal Street in New York City, the DVD pirates down on Canal Street issued a statement to the press. And they said to the press, downloading is hurting the pirate DVD business. Think about that for a second, right? When pirates are complaining about the pirates, you know you have a problem. You know that things are bad. But that's not the case. Last summer was Hollywood's first ever $4 billion summer at the box office. Never before in the history of Hollywood have they made $4 billion in one summer. Why did they do that? Because this is a different experience. This is not this, it's something else. Another example, bottled water. This is the biggest scam in the world. Water is available freely everywhere you look. You can get it wherever you go. And yet, people sell water in bottles for between 250 and 10,000 times the cost of getting tap water. And why do we do it? It's because we're not buying bottled water, we're buying experience. We're buying the French Alps or Vitality or whatever it is. But as good as tap water is, tap water can't sell us that. So these are the two things to consider. Sit back, see what happens, see what pirates do. Ask yourself what business you're in and work out what you can really sell. And a lot of people are doing this. A lot of people are thinking about piracy in this way. But this is the bit where people really fall down. And this is the thing I'm seeing in every single sector. People fail to follow through on the last thing you really need to do to compete with pirates. And it's very simple. It's very obvious. You need to actually copy them. And that's the bit that people get wrong. And we've got Disney here today. Where's Disney? Say hello, Disney. Antoinette, can you stand up? Can you show everybody your T-shirt? This is a Disney employee wearing a big pirate logo on her T-shirt. And I thought that was funny, right? Because Disney are under fire from pirates. They were talking about it in the panel discussion. But Disney get that they're having to compete. I want to read you a quote from the co-chair of Disney ABC, Anne Sweeney. And she said, "We now understand piracy is a business model, and we may not like it, but you know what? We have to compete with it." And this is the thing that people don't do, that the music industry failed because it wouldn't, really, okay, well, we're going to give some stuff away, but the files are going to be dead in a month, or you're going to have to come back and pay $10 again, or whatever it was. People are not competing on the level with pirates where they should be. But the thing is, if you don't, then somebody else is going to, because you're not the only person in your marketplace. You're under threat from pirates, but you're also under threat from your competitors. So say you're company A, and here's company B, your competitor, and pirates are kind of on the periphery of your business, and then suddenly piracy becomes a big problem. Well, yeah, you can throw lawsuits at pirates, and sometimes this is the right thing to do. But if pirates are adding value to society in some way, you can throw lawsuits and they may go away temporarily, but they'll keep coming back. And do you know what? If throwing lawsuits at your fans becomes a core component of your business model, then you no longer really have a good business model, right? Unless you're a lawyer. But here's the problem. So pirates are actually highlighting these new market spaces. And the threat is from them, but it's also from Company B. If Company B decides to start competing with pirates, well, you've got to do the same thing too. And actually, what's good about this is when this happens, this creates entirely new markets, entirely new opportunities, more revenue streams, more jobs. It's actually good for everybody if the pirates are doing something good for society in the first place. So, as I said at the beginning, our copyright laws and our IP laws are actually out of touch with the way we really use information on a daily basis. But you know what, that's fine, because eventually in time all these things will change and the government will work it out eventually. Well, do you know what, you guys don't have that kind of time. These are questions you have to think about right now, because your competitors are going to think about them for you if you don't. So when piracy is affecting your business, you really have two choices. You can either fight piracy in the courts, or you can match pirates play for play in the marketplace. To compete or not to compete, that is the question, ladies and gentlemen. That is the pirate's dilemma. Thank you very much.